Good morning. Today we're going to be working on GitHub and the RBE's code repositories. Let's get started. All right, to begin with, we have our invitation to join the WPI Robotics Engineering project. Now, you should already have an account, and you should have already given your account username to the teaching assistant, and they will have used that to create the repositories for you. And when we create those repositories, we're going to add you to this organization. The organization is called RBE 200X-Lab. In order to join the accept the invitation, you're going to need to go to that URL or follow the link that you get in your email. Most of us get that picked up in the spam filter. But either way, you can just go to this URL. You'll see a yellow box indicating that you have been invited to join this organization. You just click on View Invitation and join RB 200X. And now, instead of no repositories, you can see my repository. So this is the code repository that we're going to be using to work with in the class. This contains example projects, and as the weeks go on, additional projects will be added here, and you'll pull them down to your local disk. Now, Git works a little bit like file storage, but it actually has the ability for there to be upstream data. There's information that is not just what you've changed, but someone else upstream from you. So we maintain a repository with all of this code here, and then you're going to have your copy of the code that lives in your team number under our organization. So the upstream is where the information begins. It'll be pulled into your team repository, and from your team repository, then you want to actually use it. So it existing in the server doesn't really do you any good. Now I know the first instinct for many of you is going to be to click this little green button here. And while it does have this lovely download zip option, you do not press this. We're going to do something else. We're going to use the GitHub CLI. Now, what that means is we're going to open our repository using GitHub Desktop. And it's going to ask for permission. Go ahead. And we should be able to check it out over here. Now, pay attention to where it's being cloned to, because we're going to need that information later. And go ahead and clone our repository. Now, if you come across this little warning message, that means you haven't logged in to GitHub Desktop yet. We just go ahead, File, Options, and Sign In. And we're going to use the browser to do our sign in. Now, in order for GitHub Desktop to access our repository, it needs permission, and we're just going to authorize GitHub Desktop like that. Now that it's been authorized, we can actually search for our repository and download it directly. There it is. Or you can just search 2002, and there it is, RB 2000X Lab. Or you can search 2000X and bring up only the one project that we definitely want. And there's our team project. We're going to create the repository for you. We're going to add some sample code for you. But then you're going to use GitHub Desktop, the app, to download the copy onto the disk. And now we don't get that error message because we're logged in. Remember, it's a private repository, and you cannot put code that you're going to be graded on into a public repo, which is why we needed to set these repositories up for you. Private repos are really important. All right. So now, this is what it looks like when there are no changes between what is on the disk, the code that you've been working on, and what's up on the server. All right. Now, you might see this button here, which looks pretty convenient. Open Code in Visual Studio. Don't click that either. That button is not going to get you what you want. For right now, we're not going to do anything in GitHub Desktop because we know that we haven't made any changes. Just to be sure that we know where we're working, we're going to click the Show in Folder button. And what that should do is open up a folder with our repository. Now the repository contains one thing you probably don't understand, which is the .git directory. That contains information about all the changes that have been made to your disk and how those changes are different from what's up on the server. The .git ignore tells Git to ignore certain files that we don't want put into the repository, but the rest of these files are things you can understand. A README, a license, and 2 projects. One ultrasonic and a motor test example. And we know that they're projects because they contain platform.io.ini. A folder that contains that file is a project. So when we say open a project, we're referring to a folder that contains the platform.io.ini. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and open up VS Code and open our newly cloned project. And we're just waiting for VS Code to start up and open the platform.io extension. And you see that we have to reload VS Code to get the extension loaded. VS Code is a online tool. It's more like a website than an application. It needs to be loaded and kept up to date by the internet. All right. And every once in a while you'll notice that platform IO goes away and is not available on the sidebar here, in which case we just uninstall and install. And with that we have our platform IO sidebar. We're going to use the open menu to open up our project. And again, these are complete platform IO projects. We do not need to import from Arduino. We actually just simply open a project. So we click the Open Project button. And just to check where we actually are here, we are in C, RBE, Arduino Sketchbook, and in our Git repositories in there. So C, RBE, Arduino Sketchbook. There's our repository. Now, we're going to open up the ultrasonic project from week 1. Just click Open Ultrasonic. And we can always close this welcome menu. We don't need that. And you can see here we have our hcsro4.cpp file. Ready to use. And once Platform.io has finished installing the core, we should be able to compile. Now, while we wait for Platform.io to finish installing the subsystem, let's test out our Git pipeline. So, let's imagine I was going to make, VS Code. Let's imagine I was going to make some change to this file. And I'm just going to change this print statement on line 59 to say Kevin's setup. So let's imagine I save my change. And now we're going to say, okay, that change is an important change. I want to make sure that all my teammates have access to that change. When we come over to Bowler Studio or to GitHub Desktop, it refreshes the file, and we should notice that it found the change that we made in our CPP file. And you can see there the changes. This line was removed, and this line was added. There's no such thing as modify in this sense. There is remove and then add something different. Now I'm going to come over here and make a commit message. And commit messages should take the form of this section is what did you change, and this section is why did you change it. Remember that these commit messages are public-facing, visible to the entire staff and the entire world, and will be visible to your employer. Make sure that these messages are correct, valid, and make sense for what you're trying to do, and will not reflect poorly on you for your decision-making based on the content. All right. Now that we have our change and our message ready to go, I'm going to hit commit. So commit does not actually move this data onto the server. What it does is create a record of the change that I have made. So that one file has been changed, and we should be able to see it in our history. So we can look at the change, look at the difference, and also look at all the other changes in this file from the before time, before you had access to it. Now that we have changes that are committed, we can push to origin. And we see that the code is being pushed up to GitHub, and once it's up on GitHub, your teammates will be able to click the fetch button right here and pull your to get your changes onto the disk and into their working code. So if I come over here and I look at the commits, you can see my commit from a minute ago with the changes that I made and the commit message that I typed in. All publicly facing, all available. All right. So now let's imagine you're one of the team members who makes a change. So I'm going to come in here and pretend to be somebody else making a change by doing it in the browser, just to demonstrate what it looks like when changes are made outside of GitHub Desktop. I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of white space in there. Nothing that actually changes anything, because this is just a test. All right. So now changes have been made to the server, but they don't yet exist on the disk. So when you sit down and start working, the first thing you should do before you change any code in Visual Studio Code is to come over to the GitHub desktop app and hit Fetch from Origin. And now GitHub Desktop sees that there are changes that can be pulled into your code. And we can go ahead and click the Pull from Origin. All right. Now that everything has been pulled into here, we should see that, that little bit of white space was added to the file. So the changes that were made by your partners and pushed up to GitHub can be pulled into your local code. That's the basics of using Git for the WPI robotics program. We're going to be doing some more advanced work with Git in the later classes, but for right now, this is how you and your partners should be sharing your code. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.